But we look back to last week briefly so we can look forward to this week. How about the most insane game of the season and the most insane game of numerous seasons? Bama over Georgia last week was just outright craziness, where you had Bama, they get up 28-0. Next thing you know, Georgia fights all the way back in the second half. Georgia takes a lead with 2.5 minutes to go on a long touchdown throw. And then right away, Bama with the 75-yard touchdown throw of their own to retake the lead and win the game. It was just wild. But we used last week to look forward to this week. So Alabama, they're favored by 23.5 on the road against Vanderbilt. You have Georgia, who lost last week's game. They are favored at home by 22.5 against Auburn. So both Bama and Georgia favored by about the same amount of points. Bama on the road, and Bama head coach Kalen DeBoer setting up mouse traps all around Alabama's facility. The message was received. Yes, no letdowns over here.
Yeah, I mean, that's the eternal question. Is it easier to bounce back from an emotional loss, or is it easier to bounce back from an emotional win? You know, and I do mean bounce back because I think what a lot of people don't realize is you got to come down from the excitement of doing something that maybe in the moments you didn't think you could do, and then get back to work. It's like that Christmas morning feel, right? Everybody remembers when they're a little kid. You open up all the presents, and there's that burst of dopamine where you're just like, oh my gosh, we got everything we asked for. He showed up. He brought the presents. And then there's like those hours that follow where you're in that steep decline. Everybody needs a nap. Well, it's the same thing when you're an adult. I mean, you have these unbelievable nights out in Vegas with your boys when you're a young guy, and then you have that one dude who wakes up at 11 in the morning and goes, hey, we got to rally, and nobody wants to move. Dude, winning a football game could be the same exact feeling where you're trying to compartmentalize what just happened. It was great for all of us. We got a young receiver who's super exciting. We got to show him how to handle both praise and being demoralized, and it's difficult to do. So I'm very curious to see how Alabama responds, especially this week.
Yeah, I've been kind of going back and forth over the last couple of years, especially now that I'm doing this show with you guys, and I am just neck deep in these matchups every week. And the situational spots, I'm kind of on the fence if they're still a thing, because I just think college football has evolved so much, and the numbers are pretty sharp. But speaking of that, if Alabama and Georgia played tomorrow on a neutral field, what do you guys think the spread would be? Knowing what you know from Saturday.
Yeah,
you digested that result, do you think Bama would be favored after beating – because they weren't favored at home. So you think they'd be favored on a neutral?
I don't know that they would be. I doubt it. But the thing, you know this, if we're getting to that game, it all matters what happens right before it. You know?
Good point.
Right? So if we're talking about, like, let's say they meet in the college football playoff, it would really matter how each of those teams looked the week before. But I get your point. Yeah, Georgia might be favored.
Georgia would be favored, probably by more than a field goal. It would be like 3.5 if they played tomorrow on a neutral. And it kind of it matches how I felt about the game. Like, I didn't learn a whole lot. It was an awesome game. It was high theater. But we knew Jalen Milroe was the best player on the field. We knew Bama's defense. We talked about it all week. Bama's defense is suspect. They have not played anyone. When Georgia woke up, right, they were coming off the bye. They just got completely bulldozed in the first quarter. When they woke up, you saw the real game play out, where Georgia just was attacking the field. It helps when you have all 4 downs available on offense. But they were just attacking that Bama defense. And Georgia's offense made some suspect plays. Carson Beck turned it over 4 times. Like, I didn't learn anything new about either team. And it's kind of, all right, fun game, fun entertaining matchup, but now we have to play the rest of the season and really see what these teams are made of, because Georgia's going to climb out of this hole and make the playoff, I think. Are they going to make the SEC title game? We'll see how the rest of the schedule shapes out. But, man, we got to get round 2. We need round 2 because I want to see – Georgia's the only team in the country that can take the lead in the fourth quarter at Bryant-Denny after spotting Bama 28 points. I don't think there's another team in the country that can do that. So I'd like to see how that game plays out. If it's not 28-0 and it's not 4 turnovers for Carson Beck where he just looked completely outmatched that first quarter and Bama just, blitzed them. So I hope we get a rematch. If we do, I hope it's more of a tit-for-tat kind of game and not a just crazy swings in one direction. But we'll see. It was fun. It was probably one of the more entertaining games I've watched in a few years.
I think this has got to be one of the most frustrating things coaches, particularly in college, have to deal with. I don't know if Kalen DeBoer felt it this week, but I know a lot of coaches have, where they can just feel the letdown. They can feel exactly what Rich is talking about, right? You had this late night with your guys, it's an unbelievable evening, and now no one wants to wake up the next day. Yep. You have to feel that throughout the entire week of practice, and you can just see as a coach what's coming up. Our guys are not focused. Mm-hmm. They're not looking to the next opponent. They're still in party mode from the last game. It has to drive coaches crazy because I'm sure they try all kinds of things, and some of them just cannot get their guys to focus on the next game. That has to be the most frustrating thing in college football as a coach. And you think about this game for Alabama, this is Vanderbilt's national championship game.
Oh, yeah.
This is their college football playoff game. So I'm really curious how Alabama responds. They've routinely smacked Vanderbilt all over the place. But I want to see Jalen Milroe, who was special last week, Ryan Williams in particular, the freshman receiver who was sensational last week, if they look focused today. Or if they look like they're a little out of sorts. The same thing with Georgia's defense. I like your point, Rich. The letdown from an emotional loss. That was a very emotional game for Georgia as well. I want to see their defense. This is a lot different taking on Auburn than it was Jalen Milroe, Ryan Williams, and Bama last week. But still, Georgia's defense, what happened? We rattled off all the stats before the Bama game where they hadn't allowed an offensive touchdown. They only allowed 2 plays longer than 19 yards before the Bama game. And then it's just big play after big play. How does Georgia's defense respond against Auburn today?
Yeah, they didn't get off the bus, and it's a huge problem when you have a slow start to a game like that. And so, yeah, this is one of those. Look, it's a lot easier for Georgia to get up for their next matchup than it is for Bama because Georgia, it's like you have everything in the world to prove now because you heard what everybody had to say about you for that first half performance and then obviously not closing it out against Alabama on the road in Tuscaloosa. For Alabama, you almost prefer everything be swapped. Like you get that win on the road against the Bulldogs in Georgia, and then you come home to host the Commodores. Like it's almost worse that your players got to celebrate with the home crowd, everyone tailgating in Tuscaloosa for about 24 hours before the return to work, and then you have to now go on the road. I remember we got an enormous win at the Horseshoe, Ohio State. It was when I was playing at Penn State.
I remember this game.
It was 2008. We're on the road. It came down to fourth down plays. Yep. It came down to measly points, a fumble by a quarterback, right? I mean, it was an insane – you want to talk about tit for tat. I mean, it was back and forth the entire game. It was unbelievable. We win, and the Beaver Avenue and College Avenue at Penn State were like on fire. They were taking down street lights. Cars were getting flipped. It was like a riot. We land, though, and everything's done. Yep. Everything was over. Like, we landed, and you were like, where's the party? Everybody's going to bed. So So you almost prefer, if you're Alabama and you're Kalen DeBoer, it's like, as good as it feels to get those wins in front of your home fan base, it's almost like, gosh, I wish that win was on the road, and then we get to host Vanderbilt here and then impose our will, being the number one in the nation on them. But you can't choose those things. The schedule's the schedule. It was a great win against Georgia, and this is going to be a huge test for Kalen DeBoer with a major program, keeping his guys focused in the NIL era, because everybody's crawling out of every crevice in Tuscaloosa trying to offer these guys money to do this ad, or hey, you're number one in the nation, let's recut that car dealership commercial that we did in the preseason. We want to hype this up for this weekend's game because there's going to be a lot of people interested. So yeah, it's a different era. It's a new situation with all those things I mentioned, and it's a lot easier if you get to host your next opponent after a big win like that.
I thought we were going to the Natty that year, Rich. I really did.
Same, buddy, same.
I know. We were 9-0. So, fun backstory to that game. I had already graduated. I graduated the May of 2008, but I was dating someone who was a year younger. She was in a sorority. I was in a fraternity. I came back that weekend for like a dated function.
Yeah.
And we watched the game in like the corner of this ballroom where, everyone obviously was very excited about the game, and they had this event that night that we had to go to. It was like a wedding on a Saturday night, and we were all watching in the corner, and they win, and then, next week against Iowa.
Yep. Yep. That's the letdown. Quarter.
Yeah, the letdown spot. They lose to Iowa on a last-second field goal the following week, and then we lose in the Rose Bowl. But speaking of history, this makes me think of the Michigan loss in 2005, Rich.
Yeah.
And it's the opposite, right? Georgia loses. The bounce back, I think, is going to be strong. Mm-hmm. In 2005, Penn State lost to Michigan on a last-second play. It was an awesome game. Awesome game. It was the Lloyd Carr timeout game, got a second back on the clock. Manningham caught the touchdown from Henne in the final second. The next week, you go to Illinois, 56 points in the first half. Now, Illinois was terrible, but they won 63-10, or you guys won 63-10. I wish I was there on the sidelines in Champaign that day, but it was the classic bounce-back spot. Bad team, just like Vandy, just like Auburn, on the road, and it was egregious how badly you guys were upset about Lloyd Carr calling timeout, arguing 1 second back on the clock, Chad Henne to Manningham. I still have nightmares about it because I think we maybe were the only linebacking core in the country that could shut down Vince Young that year. But
this is my nightmare.
I digress. I'm not bitter about it at all. Georgia by 1 million today.
Yeah.
Yeah. You've moved on very well.
I've moved on 20 years ago. I'm still not thinking about it.
That's right. We've got Rich Ohrnberger, Penn State All-American, Jared Smith, FSR betting analyst, and Penn State grad, if you couldn't tell from all of that. I'm Brian Noe. It's football time at BetMGM. Use code COUNTDOWN and receive up to $1,500 back in bonus bets if you don't win your first bet. When you register with BetMGM, you'll get instant access to a variety of parlay selection features, live betting options, signature bets, and the best daily promotions in the business. Download the BetMGM app today or visit BetMGM.com and use code COUNTDOWN to receive up to $1,500 back in bonus bets if that bet loses.